guys, it's Trisha, the left-handed stitcher. I'm going to do sort of a tutorial on how I make my project bags, and we're sitting at this angle because I've done a lot of prep work already and my back has started bothering me, so I'm sitting down for the rest of this as I go through the process, and then we'll move over to the sewing machine and the ironing board and do all that. So for right now, we're right here. Hopefully, Kitty, quit rubbing on that. Kitty was rubbing on the tripod. Okay, so hopefully we don't get too many interruptions. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning here already. So Grandma might be coming out at some point. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. As you guys may remember, a while back I made this project bag. This was my first one that I made. I used a tutorial on YouTube made by the Missouri Star Quilt Company. This is pretty much step by step done the way they showed, just slightly bigger. Because they did a little pouch, I made it bigger for the project bag. And this one, the size of it was dictated by the size of the zipper that I had on hand. I got some bargain fabric from Walmart to use as just a prototype to see how well it went. It went fairly well. It was easy tutorial to follow. My zipper wasn't the best. I had to do a little bit of doctoring, if you can see right there, on the inside to fix the mistake that I did, but it works fine now, and I learned from my mistake. So after that, I made another one in this style for a gift for a stitchy friend, and then a few months ago I made one for my friend Becky, and at the same time I made this one for myself. And that's when I switched to this format, which is a 1/3, 2/3 arrangement, which is a very pleasing to the eye format, and I like it a lot better than I like this style right here. Now this one was also dictated by the size of the zipper that I had on hand, and it worked well. It fits my 8x8 and my 9.5x8 Q-snaps very easily, but it will not fit my 11x11. The 11x11 will fit through this opening without the grime guard, but just barely. And once it's in, it will just barely zip. So it's not functional as a project bag for my 11x11. That's why I decided I need to make another one, hence why we're doing this now. I've had requests from people to show my process, so that's what I'm going to do tonight. How did I decide on the size of the new project bag? I used this as the basis, and let me grab what I need to put in it, which is my 11x11, the pattern for it. We'll go with, it's roughly the same size, so that's not an issue. And I need it to fit this thing. For future uses, I use this guy. It's called a Knitter's Pride, and it's just a little portfolio with a magnetic surface here and magnets to hold your patterns in place. I like to use this for patterns that fit on normal sheet of paper, and that's how I travel with them. So I want the new bag to be able to fit this thing as well. And it's just a little bit wider than the 11x11. So based on this project bag, I added some you know, some to the width to accommodate these things, and just a little bit to the height to, you know, do the same. So I determined that my bag needs to be 16 by 14, and I have a nice long 22-inch zipper, so I was not dictated by the size of the zipper for this project. I've learned just to go bigger, and you can cut it back to what you need. So let me move this off, and before I move this aside, I'll just go through, if you remember, I also made the little accessories bag that matched, and the arrangement of the fabrics, I swapped them around for this one because it looked good. You know, that's how I liked how it looked, because I auditioned the fabrics in different configurations to decide on how I wanted to arrange them. So the thread that you're going to use will be a matching, or if you want, contrasting thread, your choice, but you will base it on your upper fabric, because that's where you're going to see it. It's this top stitch seam right here. I'll get that up there. So there's a top stitch seam right there, and a top stitching up here with the zipper. All the rest of this, and right there at the top, this little zipper hold. All the rest of the seams are internal, so you don't see them. So you won't see the thread along any part that has your bottom fabric. So I have a red thread in my sewing machine right now waiting for this project, but I also have another thread ready, because the secondary reason for doing a project bag this week is this little guy. If you've been on Stitch Mania or Cross Stitch It's Fun over the past day or two, you may have seen this and my fabrics that I've chosen to go with it. I stitched this up for the Stitch What's challenge this week, Ravishing in Red, and as you may know, you get extra points if you FFO your cross stitch project within the week. So that's why I'm doing this, because he's going to get added to the front of the bag. So I have matching thread for the fabric that it's stitched on, because I'll just do a little top stitch seam right here to add it to the front of the bag later. So there's that. And of course you want to choose a zipper that will coordinate, since you see a little bit of it at the top. I like to just get it to look matchy-matchy, because I am a matchy-matchy kind of person. Alright, so we can move this aside, I think. Oh, how did I determine the size of the accessory bag? When I made this one, he was dictated by the size of the leftover piece of interfacing that I had when I made this guy. So I just used that leftover piece of interfacing and just built him. Now it turns out he is a perfect width for me. This width fits my highlighters and my cheaters and all the little doodads I like to take with me. But the height, as you can see, has a little wiggle room. So I stuck with this width, but I shortened it a little bit because it doesn't need to be this tall. And it worked out well because my leftover piece of interfacing after cutting for this next bag was a ½ inch shorter. So worked out perfect. So my accessory bag will now be 7 inches by 6 inches. And that's what I've prepped everything for. Alright, so now let me show you how I cut all of these fabrics and just my process up to this point. So my main bag, 16 by 14, I have to accommodate for the seam allowances on all the sides, which on these outer sides can range from 1/4 inch to 3/8. I try for 3/8. Sometimes I achieve it, sometimes it's more of a quarter of an inch, because most of my sewing tends to be quilter based sewing, so that's what we were taught, a 1/4 inch seam. That's what I usually go with. So I like to account for 3/8 inch seams on the outer edges of the project, and if I end up doing a little bit narrower, then that's fine. I'd rather have a little bit more, more than less, let's put it that way. So I had 3/4 inch for the margins. Therefore, I'm cutting my interfacing to 16 3/4 by 14 3/4. And I need 2 pieces of that. Then my lining that's going to get fused to the interfacing, I cut it just a little bit bigger. 17 by 15, just a smidgen bigger. Cut 2 pieces of that, and the reason for that is when you fuse the interfacing to the lining, the interfacing that I use comes in bolt form, so it has curves to it, and when you iron it down, it sometimes tends to shift just a little bit. So the first one that I made, I cut them the same size, and then it shifted, and then I had to trim, all that. So I start with a slightly larger piece of lining fabric to iron the interfacing to. So this is what my interfacing ended up being. It's a little bit bigger, and the lining fabric, this is what I chose. So once it's, the process of fusing the interfacing to your lining fabric, you will follow the instructions that comes with the interfacing that you choose. I've chosen a medium weight craft one because that's just the way I like my bags to have the structure, but not the bulk of, say, the fusible fleece that some people use in their bags. Personal preference, do what you like. This particular one, you put the lining fabric face down on the ironing board. You place the interfacing over top with the glue side facing the fabric, not your iron. And then I take my pressing cloth, which is just a piece of an old sheet, a thin cotton woven. I get it wet, but not dripping, and it gets placed over top. And then the dry iron, set at cotton, is placed over top and held there for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then you move it to another spot, and you keep moving it around until you've hit all the spots on top. And then you take that off and flip it over and work it from this side until it's nice and firm and got all the edges and everything. So once my lining is fused to both sides, the basic construction of the bag is you build a front panel, you build a back panel, you sew the zipper to the front panel, you sew the zipper to the back panel, and then you sew the 2 panels together, and that's how the bag is made. It's just very simple. The zipper can, at first it's a little tricky, but it's still doable. It's very doable. It took me just a little bit of practice. After that first one, the next one went very, very smoothly. So you just gotta jump in and give it a try, and you'll get it. So I'll be showing you the process of the zipper once I get to the sewing part. Now, to figure out, well, this interfacing right here is a blank palette for you. You decide on the fabrics you want to use. You decide on the arrangement of the fabrics. You can do the center strip with another fabric on either side. You can do 3 different fabrics. You can do your fabrics in diagonal. It's completely up to you how you want to decorate this. So once you've decided on your preference, you do what you need to, but I'll show you how I do mine, and that will help you with the mechanics of doing it on your own bag. Since I like to do a 1/3, 2/3 arrangement, sometimes I just eyeball it, and other times I take measurements and I do calculations. I'll show you how the calculations are done in case this is the arrangement that you like to do and you like to be, you don't want to trust your eye. You like measurements, so this is what I'll show you how. This is the size of the height of the panel, and 1/3 of that comes out to 4.916 repeating 6. So I pulled up, I'll just grab my tablet and show you this part. Let me get to it. I pulled up a fraction conversion chart to help me with this. It's just a chart that shows you the decimals and what fractions that they are equal to. And what I do is I find where my number is, so 0.916, it's somewhere between 0.906 and 0.921. So it's closer to this one, so I kind of figure out that it's this one, which is 29/32 of an inch. So what I do then is I just kind of make a decision. 29/32 is just 3/32 of an inch away from 5 inches, and for me that's close enough. So I decide that I want the top panel to be 5 inches in height. Little graphic to help. So what I do is I go to my piece of fabric here, and because I started with not the size of the bag but the size of the panel, I can just use that 5-inch measurement. I measure from the top to 5 inches and mark that line, and then I mark a 1/4 of an inch above that as another line, and I'll show you right now why that is. When I construct the bag, I'll grab the fabrics that I prepped for the little guy just to help with showing you. When I go to sew the bag, I'm going to take the bottom panel, line it up with that top line, face up. Then I'll take the top panel, I will line it up to the same line but face down. You sew at the 5-inch line. Your fabrics go up to this line because you're going to be sewing at 1/4 of an inch for this seam right here, and then this will get folded upwards at the seam, and that's how that works. So that's why I draw the 2 lines to help me with placement of these panels. And now that will help me show you how I measure for the panels themselves. I don't like to take the measurement of the bag and figure it out that way. I like to use the actual piece, because when you're ironing, things might shift a little bit. When you cut, things might get a little wonky. It's just better to measure off the piece than try to figure out from the bag size. Let's put it that way. So for the bottom panel, I'm measuring from this line down to the bottom edge. And I measured this side and I measure this side to make sure that they're the same. If they're a little bit different, I make sure that measurement will cover both of them. If I gotta trim off a little bit after I've added the fabric, so be it. And then I measure the width. And as you can see, I've figured out those measurements by doing that. And then my top panel, which is going to be my solid, this one's a little bit different. Let me show you the mechanics of it to help demonstrate. Alright, so the panel, I need to measure from the sewing line up to the top, but also adding into that 1/4 of an inch that's going to get, caught in the seam. So you see how you have 1/4 of an inch from there to the seam, and then your measurement from the seam to the top. And that's how I figure that out. And so my solid piece is going to be cut to that size. In addition to your panels that are going to go on to your pieces of fabric that are going to get sewn to your panels, you also need just 2 other pieces of fabric. The zipper is going to you'll see why this is needed in a minute, but the zipper, I need a 1/2 inch by 3 inch piece of fabric that is the same as the top fabric, because as you might remember, it's this little piece right here along the top. So if it's the same fabric as the top, it just kind of blends right in. And then since I add a D-ring to my bag, this is what will create the little tab that feeds into the D-ring and then holds it in the seam of the bag. And how I determine that size is I needed it to be 3/4 of an inch wide once it was sewn, and the way I sew it, it'll basically get folded and then refolded and sewn, but not quite just that way. I'll show you once I get to the ironing board how I prep that fabric and then I'll sew it. So because of that, 3/4 of an inch times 4 is 3 inches. So I determined a 3 inch by 3 inch piece works, because once it's in the bag, I need just enough to get caught in the seam, and I don't need a whole lot sticking out. My first one that I did, I made a piece that was about that long, way too much. So I determined this is a perfect amount for me to work with. So 3 inches by 3 inches. And again, the same fabric as the top panel, because it comes out of the bag at that point. So just to help. I mean, again, you don't have to match. I like to match. So I got those cut. And then will do the zipper after I've sewn the panels onto the front and the back. What do I do next? Okay, and as you know, I have also prepped the little accessory bag. And this one I decided to keep it with the paisley on the bottom and the solid red at the top. So that will be the arrangement. And for this one, I need the little panel for the zipper ends, but the accessories bag doesn't get a D-ring. There's no reason for it as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I need. And again, this one, I didn't really measure. I eyeballed it. I determined that the top panel looked really good with a 2-inch width. So that's how I determined my lines on this one. And then from those lines, I measured to cut the fabric panels. So those are prepped. And then this little guy got prepped just by adding a piece of fusible fleece to the back. And then I cut the stitching fabric about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch away, and I folded it over and ironed it to get it to sit nicely. Hopefully it'll sew on nicely. I got the corners clamped so that they stay in place until I get ready to sew it. So this is the first time I've done this. I have no idea how well it's going to turn out, but we're going to give it a try. So that's ready. And then let me get to, alright, I'll just show you the measurements that I used for the little accessories bag. And again, these measurements are based on my panels. So yours might be just a little bit different if you choose to do this size. And again, you might decide that you want to decorate it differently. So, but the one thing that will stay constant is this size for the zipper ends. And then the amount that you add to your zipper pouch desired size is that 3/4 of an inch. Again, the lining gets cut just a little bit bigger, so then it can, yeah, you know, I already went through that. It's late, so you can hear my voice is a little raspy and I'm a little bit foggy, so we'll just get through this the best we can. Alright, so now it's time to start sewing. So what I'll do is I will grab one of these panels and my fabric that I've cut already. I will take my bottom panel and I will need to stand up for this one. I will place it right up to that top line right there. Face up and get the sides to match up to the sides of, again, if it's a little bit bigger, that's fine, and we'll trim it once we're done. Once that's in place, I take the top fabric and I place it face down right up to that same line. So I'll get both of them set right up to that line. Match those. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch from this edge right here. So I'm sewing this line, which is 1/4 of an inch away from where I place the fabrics. So let me move to the sewing machine and I will do this panel and this panel, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay? Alright, so here I'm at the sewing machine. I've got my red thread loaded and I'm ready to sew. I've got my tails of my thread caught by this little scrap piece of fabric like I've shown you before that I like to use. I was taught that in quilting class, so and it's very helpful. So we're just going to do a nice 1/4 of an inch seam. I've got my 1/4 of an inch foot on, and I don't feel I need to pin because the interfacing is kind of grabby. You know, it's a rough texture, so these don't tend to shift a whole lot. I just need the wonder clamps on as I'm moving it from the cutting table to the machine, just so they don't flop around. So once I'm here, I can take this off and get ready to sew. We'll do right on there. Alright, let me make sure I know where my sewing line needs to be. Okay. Yep, that's where it needs to be. Alright, getting ready. And it's just a straight stitch. So you pretty much know what a straight stitch is. You don't need to watch me sew this. So I'm going to sew both of my panels, and then I will meet you at the ironing board to show you the next step. Okay? Alright, so here we are at the ironing board. I've done my straight stitch across, and now one thing I learned in quilting class is you just hit that seam with your iron before you move it to lock the thread in place. Nice and easy. Now what you do is you take this panel and you flip it up. So then you use the iron to slide it and get a nice good seam right there, just like so. Alright, so now I'm going to do the second one off camera, but before I do that, after I've done both of them, I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and do a top stitch, just between roughly a 1/4 of an inch, maybe just a little bit less, and that just gives it a neater appearance, and this will stay nice and flat. It won't bubble up at all once that's done. So let me do the other little pieces here at the ironing board before I move over and do that. And then once I've done the top stitching, you don't really need to watch me. That's another straight stitch. I'll meet you back over at the cutting board to show you. Alright, so these little pieces, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit. Alright, so here is zoomed in for this part. I'm redoing this part because the footage I shot earlier was really bad. Zooming in combined with the low light conditions, my camera freaked out and it was constantly going in and out of focus. So I've cut 2 more pieces of this just to show you the process again. I have the one of the 2 1.5 inch by 3 inch pieces that I cut for the zipper ends, and the 3 by 3 piece that I cut for my D-ring tab. So here is what that process looked like. I'm going to hit it with an iron like so, turn it over, and just fold it in half like so. Finger press it down a little bit. And the finger pressing, the purpose of that is just to kind of get it where you want it. That way it doesn't like pop up and get way out of place when you have to let go of it to put the iron on it. So there that is. Open it back up and then fold this raw edge in so that it butts right up into that folded crease. That way you're trapping the raw edges in, and then do the other side. And if you did it well, these two little halves should meet up pretty nicely. Get up to the camera like so. Yep, pretty good. This will get cut in half because one half of it will do one end of the zipper and the other half will do the other end of the zipper. But it's easier to do it as one piece because little pieces of fabric doing that fold type thing, it's a little bit more difficult to do little tiny pieces. So we do it as one piece and cut it in half afterwards. Alright, so now the 3-inch. It is the same principle. You're gonna fold it in half, hit it with the iron, and again folding one side in so that it butts right up into that folded creased corner. There we go. And hit it with the iron, and then do the other side. Just, you know, fiddle with it until it feels and looks right, and then hit it with the iron. Alright, so now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and show you how I did this part, because this is for the D-ring to go on, like so. Alright, so all I need to do is I'm going to run a straight stitch along this edge to seal these two, you know, sides together, and then I'll run another one along the other side just to match, you know, make it look even. So all it is just running a quick little side seam up one side, and trimming. Get it ready. And do the other side. And you don't need to back stitch either one of those ends because it's going to get caught in the seam when you sew the bag together. Alright, so there it is. It is just 2 straight stitches to make it into a tab. I'm going to take it to the ironing board and iron it in half. That way the D-ring will have a nice crease for it to sit in, like so. Alright. Alright, so before I go back to the cutting board, or the whatever you call the cutting area, I am going to fix the little piece to the top of the front panel. I kind of eyeballed where I want it, taking into account, you know, that there's going to be a seam allowance on this side and a seam allowance on this side. So it might work out, it might not, but either way, this is what I decided to do. This little process right here, I have no idea how well it's gonna go, but we're just gonna film it and see what happens. Alright, so I need to start at that corner. Maybe just a little bit in from the corner. I'm aiming for just a little bit under 1/4 of an inch seam on this. So we're going to sew a few stitches forward, a few stitches back to lock my thread. And then we're just going to try to sew around. I'm going to sew to the corner, pivot, and we'll just go from there. I have it pinned. Hopefully it stays nicely in place. We'll just see how it goes. This is complete first time I've ever done this type of thing. So, and that's the beauty of using matching thread. So you don't really see your stitches too like super evident. Alright, I want to make sure that that little bit of fabric is in there, like so. When I get to that corner. Alright, so I'm sewing close to the corner, and then I take that last stitch or two with my hand crank, and I'm aiming for the same distance to this edge as I am to the edge over here. So needles down, lift my presser foot, and I pivot around. And I get it lined up on this side. A little bit awkward because I gotta hold that extra bit in. I set my presser foot down and I just start sewing. Try to keep it somewhat even of a seam allowance all the way around. Getting close to the other end, so I'll take this clamp off, tuck that little piece of fabric that wants to poke back out, back in there, and so close. Do the last little bit with your hand crank. Estimate, you know, if you're close enough. You're gonna look like you're like way too close, but it'll be just right. Needle down, press your foot up, and pivot. You kind of have to wrestle this whole thing to get it to pivot, and then yep, I'm good. So press your foot down and sew. Alright, I'm getting close. Clamp off. And before I get to the other, get around to this side, I'm just going to trim this thread while I'm at it. In the front and the back. Okay. Oops, sorry. Drop my little piece of fabric. Put that over here. Alright, and then again, I'm going to tuck that little piece of fabric that wants to poke out back underneath. Again, let's get it just in there. I think that would be good. Alright, let's give this a try. Maybe not. That one's a little bit stubborn. Let me grab my scissors. A little bit of extra help here. There we go. Alright, let's hand wheel, needle down, the presser foot, and pivot. And if you're a little bit off at the beginning, just angle your fabric a little bit to steer it back to where it needs to be. It's not too bad. I just need to angle it a little bit this way so that my seam allowance gets back to where it needs to be. So I'll just sew a few stitches and then straighten it out. And down to this last corner. Just a few cranks, I think. That should be good. Pivot. And I just need to go far enough to meet up with my original start point, which is right there. Alright, so now I have finished stitching this thing on, and I trim the threads, take out my pins, throw them back there, and I think it turned out pretty darn good. Wow, I'm actually quite happy with that. Check that out. Not bad for my first try at doing this. So, alright. So now I'm going to go back to the cutting board and we'll continue with the normal process. This was odd. So hey guys, check out who has taken up residence in my chair at the cutting station. Can you say hi to Sonia? Say hi to Flosstube. Yep. Alright, so the cutting station, I'm going to show you this real quick. You can see how the fabric in the front pokes out just a little bit beyond, you know, there. And it's better down here, just a little bit. So what I'm going to do now, off camera, you know, because it's just, I take my ruler and I just get it right up to that edge, and I use my rotary cutter to trim off those extra little edges. So once I'm done with that, I'll come back and we will continue with the process. Alright, so I've trimmed away any excess fabric. As you can see, it's just tiny little slivers, you know. I'd rather trim away a little bit than find out I didn't have enough. So that's done, and the next thing to do is to add the zipper. Well, first prep the zipper and then add the zipper. My previous one, I started with the zipper on the front side, and well, I'm left-handed, so I want to see if starting from the back side will make the zipper go in the other direction. We'll see. We'll see. So I'm going to do back side first, but first thing to do is to prep the zipper. Now, the way to do that, these vinyl zippers are really, really nice because they're easy to cut and you sew right over them. They won't damage your needle at all. If you get a metal zipper, that's a whole different ball game. So I take my zipper that's longer than I need it. I will see that little tab right there that holds it. I'm gonna cut just right. I'm gonna cut that little piece off right there to start. So I like to grab a little ruler just to make sure my cut is straight, and you just use your rotary cutter and gotta press a little harder, but it cuts right right through it. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do, so I'm going to take this little guy that I made. I will get him on my table so that I can cut him in half. And this doesn't have to be exact, it's got a little bit of wiggle room. You'll see it when I put it on the zipper. So now I've got 2 pieces of that for the 2 ends of my zipper. I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how I do that. Alright, so I'm back at the sewing machine. I put the red thread back in, and what we're going to do is you open, oh, I zoomed way in so you can see it really well. That's why I'm a little out of camera. So you open that up and you put your cut end of your zipper right in there, like so. I'm going to sew straight across there, catching the end of the zipper in there. Go back and forth a couple of times to make sure it's in there really nicely. So let's do that. And by having ironed that, you know, all those little creases in there, makes this a lot easier to do. So you're not fighting that fabric at the same time that you're corralling your zipper. So make sure it's up in there really good, and sew across. I go a little slow because it is a bit bulky. And then I back up and sew back through. Alright, so as you can see, I've caught the end of the zipper in this little tab right here. And then what I want to do right now is I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm going to trim that little extra piece of fabric off right in line with the edge of the zipper. So I have scissors somewhere right here. And so I will just, using the edge of the zipper flange as a guide, I'll just trim that right even with it. Alright, so that end's done. The next thing to do is take your fabric panel and use it as a guide. What you're going to do is you're going to place your zipper, the end that you fixed, right in line with your fabric panel. And that doesn't have to, okay, I want this end, oh, let me get the camera, okay, I want this end to be sitting on a line. It'll make it a lot easier to do this. So sitting on a line here, I get the edge of the zipper flush with this side, and then make sure it's flat. When the zipper comes out of the package, it's kind of bent in a couple of places. I will take it and hit it with the iron to get it to lie flat. And that makes this a lot easier. So you go along, and I know that my panel is at this line. I need to cut the zipper 1 inch shorter. So if my panel is at this line, I'm going to cut at this line. So I'll pull the panel away, grab my little ruler, make sure I don't shift the zipper too much. And one important thing that I need to make sure to do, and you need to make sure, is that when you make that cut, the zipper head needs to be on the other side of it. If you cut it without doing that, you're basically boned and you have to get a brand new zipper. because there's no way of fixing that. So now I'm going to line it back up. Go down here. Get this ruler on that line that I need to cut at. And do my cut. Right across. Alright. So now what I'm going to do is go back to the sewing machine, use this other little piece and do the same thing on this end. So let's go do that. Alright, this time I'm not as zoomed in because you've seen it once. It's pretty much the same. The only difference is that zipper is not together at that end because you had to zip the zipper head down to make sure that it was still part of your zipper. So you just have to kind of massage these two ends down so you can be certain that they're at the same level, I guess. I'll even zip this a little bit closer. Alright. So you just need to get it as close as you can. Fit that little piece over top. And then take it down to the sewing machine. Try to make sure it's into that crease as far as it'll go, and these two sides are in there at the same angle and, you know, depth. Let's put it that way. And then get my little piece started in presser foot and sew across. And then back and across. Alright, there we go. Trim our threads off. Alright, and you just want to check on both sides to make sure that it caught both sides and that your zipper is in there nice and firm. So then just double check that it's going to zip back and forth nicely, and it does. So I'll trim off these little tabs and then I'll meet you back at the cutting board and show you the next step. Alright, so the next step is to take your panel. Like I said, I'm starting with the back panel this time just to see if it changes the way that my zipper will sit. I like to start with the zipper head at the opposite end that I'm going to sew, and I know that I like to sew with the bulk of the piece hanging out of the sewing machine rather than into the sewing machine. So we're going to start with the first end on the left side. You want your zipper face down on your panel, which is face up, and get it flush, that edge of that flange of the zipper flush with the panel, but center it. It's going to have about a ½ inch on either side. Since you cut it an inch shorter, you split the difference between the two sides. So I'm going to get that lined up, and then I'll meet you back at the sewing machine. Alright, so before I move to the next step of sewing the zipper on, I need to change the zipper foot. I need to change the foot on my sewing machine to the zipper foot. And for this one, it's real easy. It's just this little lever that you push, and the old one drops down, so you slide it off. And what I'll do is I'll pull this back a little bit. I like to, let me take a quick look at how I'm going to sew this to decide what side of the zipper foot I want to work from. Alright, so I'm going in like this. I want this zipper foot to ride right up against the zipper, pretty much, or close to. So I want to put it on this side. I gotta get it just the right angle, and I'll know it when my foot just clicks into place. There we go. It clicks down on it and picks it right up. Alright, so next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my needle is positioned in the right spot, that it's going to basically go down right in that little channel. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit closer so you can see, maybe. We'll see. Alright, my zipper foot has a little notch right there for the needle to go down in. That way, if the side of the zipper foot rides up against the zipper there, my stitching line will be just right in that line a little bit, pretty darn close. So it's pretty much in there. Alright, so what I want to do now is I've got it flush up against there. I'm going to position it so that when this foot gets to the zipper, it's going to ride right up against there. And then I start stitching on from the edge and I work my way on. And then we'll just sew along, and hopefully this goes well. I've done a few zippers, so I'm fairly comfortable with what I'm doing, but each time there's still just a little bit of anxiety over it. But one thing you need to remember is that stitching can be removed. So if it doesn't go well the first time, you can take the stitches out and try again. So let's just go for it. Alright, I seem to be hitting at a good spot. So I need to help it past that first little point because there's a lot of bulk. And then as you can see, my stitching is going right where it needs to be. So I need to make sure that my zipper stays flush and that the zipper foot rides right where it should all the way along. Alright, and you see I've gotten caught. Okay, there we go. Not a problem. Again, make sure zipper is flush and then keep that zipper foot riding right where it should. And also, that's like I said before, the beauty of matching thread. When I say a straight stitch, my stitches are rarely perfectly straight. But you don't know it because I use matching thread. And it all turns out perfectly well. even with slightly wonky stitches. I've gotten pretty close to the end. What I need to do now is I'm going to hand crank it so the needle goes down into, zipper fabric. Because I need to lift my presser foot, I want that needle down so that I'm not, moving it. The purpose of this is I need to move the zipper head past the presser foot, because the zipper head is too bulky for that zipper foot to get past. If you try to sew right past this, the whole thing is going to go just really wonky right there. So you need to move this. So in order to do that, needle down, lift the presser foot up, and then what you do is you just grab the little tab on the zipper and try to push it past. Sometimes it'll go past like that, other times it'll kind of bind up right there. What you do, let me go out just a little wider to help. The little lever that you use to lift your presser foot up, if you press it up, it'll lift that presser foot up just a little bit more. And then I use the side of my hand and my fingers to hold, the zipper in place, and then with this hand I can massage it and get it past, just like that. And then what you do is you put your presser foot back down, get everything lined back up, and continue stitching. Alright, as I get towards this end right here, this little tab right here, the little lip on it, likes to catch. So as I'm getting closer, I want to just make sure that it transitions nicely. So I use my hand crank to get right past that point. Cause see, right now, let me get in tighter. It might be different on your machine. See if I can get in there. Sorry about the crappy camera work. Right here, right at the very edge of my zipper presser foot, that little flange has gotten caught on it, and it happens every time. So I'm gonna grab my little ghetto stiletto to help push that down so I can keep my finger away from the needle. So let me hold it in place, lift that presser foot up a little bit to get it to fall underneath, and then crank it a little more and make sure that it rides underneath and doesn't get caught. And it works. Thank you. So now I will just back up a little bit over that tab right there, just to be certain that it's stuck, and go right off the edge. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip that zipper up with iron to get it to lay a little bit flat that way. And a little tricky because of the teeth right there, but just do your best. And that zipper head, again, it's a little little hard to work around, so you move it out of the way to get that section right there nice and pressed. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm going to start with my zipper, in the closed position. I'm going to, alright, I'm going to use the iron now to press this little, free edge down that way. So let's do that. And again, sorry that I'm a little out of camera right there. Let's change your angle just a little bit. Alright, again, zipper head's a little tough to work around, so you move it out of the way in order to get that little corner. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I will move that back. I'm going to take it back to the machine and I'm going to sew right along the edge of this flange so that it gets fixed down. I didn't do that the first time, and that's why I had to go back and do a little hand sewing to doctor it, because I didn't do that and that little flange right there kept getting caught in the teeth. So this is that one important step that I learned to do. Alright, so now I have to sew that little flange down, and so that requires a little wrangling of the edge of this. Since it's got to go on like this, I have to roll it to get it to fit in that crook of the machine. So, a little awkward. Alright, so now I'm gonna still use my zipper foot, and I will start off the fabric, and I will try to get it as close to this edge as I can, but you're not using the presser foot anymore to go up against the zipper, so you have to steer it a little bit. So we're gonna get started and make sure that it gets past that bulk part. Nice and gracefully, and I am hitting that right where I want it, really close to that edge. And so now I'm going to keep sewing. And if your zipper, I call it the flange, it's just that piece of fabric that sticks out from the side. If it wants to bunch up right there, it's towards the needle, I have to keep massaging it so that it stays flat as I go along. As you can see, my seam got a little farther away from the edge right there. But again, I'm using thread that matches the front, so you're not gonna be able to see too clearly just how wonky that seam got right there. So working along. Trying to hit close to the edge, but anywhere. Alright, again, I'm getting close to the end here, So I need to do the same thing. Even though I'm a little bit farther over, this zipper head will still cause some issues. So crank it so that the needle goes down so you can lift the presser foot up. But it should be a little bit easier to, yep, zip past because you're just that little bit farther away. So presser foot down. Make sure that all that extra fabric is not in the way, and continue to sew. I'm getting bound up over on this end. Alright. So now as I get close to this end, again, grab my ghetto stiletto and make sure that that little tab right there goes underneath and not catching on. And then as I'm going along, I will hand crank it just past. As I do, I massage that little tab underneath the presser foot. There we go. And then sew off. Alright, so now I will trim my threads. Alright. So now, let's see if I can get up to the camera. You can see a nice little top stitch right along the edge there, and that keeps the zipper nice and flush, and it keeps that little flange on the inside fixed down so that it doesn't interfere with the teeth. So I gotta go back to the cutting board for the next part. I'll meet you back there. Alright, so now that we're back at the cutting, I'm gonna move this to the side, grab my other panel. As you can see, this is my front panel. Get it situated nicely, face up. Now take this piece and you want your zipper face down. So you'll place this just like so and do the same thing. Get it even on both sides, and I grab some wonder clips just to hold it in place so it stays where it should until I get to right before, you know, I sew to that part. Alright, and then okay, this next one, you're going to do things a little backwards. You will start with your zipper pulled back about 5 inches or so. And get your zipper flange set flush. Alright, so now we go back to the sewing machine. Alright, so this time I'm sewing like so, with it hanging out this way. So I'm going to again make sure that it's nice and lined up. I'm going to get it positioned underneath that zipper foot, and then start sewing on. Again, that past that bulk part, I like to hand crank it. I don't have to worry about that little flange, that little lip getting caught because I'm going in this direction. but I still like to hand crank because that is a lot of bulk for it to go through, and it might try to bind up on me. Alright, so there we are, we're past it. Now I'm going to remove this clip so that I can make sure that that little flange is flush, and then sew forward. Alright, so you're going to sew forward till you're almost to the zipper. Stop, put that needle back down in, lift your presser foot. Now I'll take this clip off just to give myself a little bit more wiggle room. The tricky part is, let me get out a little wider, maybe I can help. Okay, moving the camera a little bit back further. I need to get my hand between these layers to get to the zipper head. So again, get it to the presser foot, and if it binds up, get your other hand and lift up that lever, and that usually does the trick. So get it past the presser foot, put the presser foot down, and once you make sure that you're still flush, continue sewing. Getting a nice little collection of wonder clips over here. It's a good thing that, you know, they come like 50 to a box. Alright, again, just making sure that I'm flush. Getting close to the end. Again, adjust to make sure that I'm flush. And sew till I get close. Where to go? Grab my little stiletto and use it to make sure, as I hand crank past that point, that that little lip goes under the presser foot instead of getting caught on it. There we go. Now just one more crank and then I can sew off. Alright, hey guys, it's a little bit later. Yeah, my son got up. He's off to school now. Alright, so next thing to do is I'm going to turn this. And as you see, I've gotten off a little bit shifted, but that'll be fine. That'll be fine. I'll compensate when I sew it up. Alright, so here is the D-ring in its little tab, and I need to place it on the front. I do it about, you know, a couple inches down. I like it towards the top because then if I clip something on it, it'll, you know, hang or something like that. So this, I'm going to put a pin, or try to. This is pretty thick. See if I can get through the fabric right there with this. And really this just needs to hold it in place right here so that when I sew it and then I turn it, it'll be on the outside. So the next thing you do is you fold it like this, right sides together, and I'm going to match up corners and we'll let the top sort itself out. This part doesn't have to be terribly exact. Just what we're doing now is we're going to sew sides and bottom, but before you do that, very important, should have done this before I folded it, you unzip the zipper. Very important. If you forget to unzip the zipper, you won't be able to turn it. So unzipping the zipper doesn't have to be quite all the way, but at least 3/4. Okay, folding it back, I'm going to match up the corner and I'm going to clamp it, and I'll work my way up, kind of fudging it a little bit, matching up the edges as I go. See how that works out up here. Yeah, should be good. Yeah, I haven't been to bed yet, so a little tired. Okay, turn it this way and start matching up these corners. Make sure you got your layers all straight. Clamp there. And okay. Alright, so the sides are clamped. I'll put a couple down at the bottom just to keep it from shifting too much. Alright, so you kind of have a choice if you want to start up here and sew down to the corner but not off. You know, do that same, get it up close, pivot, and do the corners like that, back up. Or you could do like I do. I will start at this corner, I will sew up and off. I'll do the other side, and then I'll do the bottom. So I'll take you to the sewing machine and we'll do that. Alright, I'm ready to start sewing one of the sides of the bag, and I'm going to start on this one. So clean it off, get it up, and this, like I said, these seams I try to do like a 3/8 inch, so I'll position it right where it needs to be, and then just start sewing. Those corners, I'll back up a little bit just to give it a little bit more reinforcement, and sew right up. And the reason I like to start from a corner and sew up, because up here it doesn't need to be exact, so if there's any mismatch, it'll work itself out up here. just like I am doing right now. Make sure my edges close, and my tab for the D-ring is right here, so I'm going to sew up to it and then hand crank through it because it is just a lot of layers to go through. Yep. And you can hear my machine struggle a little bit. Almost through it. Few more. And you know what? Given how much, this might have some weight on it, so I'm going to try to go backwards. We'll see how well it does. Yeah. Alright, and then forwards again. And then again, I get up here, and this is a lot of thickness to go through. So, yep, you hear it start to struggle. So, I hand crank it, and ever so gently, I reach around and give it just a little bit of a tug. Not much, just enough to encourage it to feed through as I hand crank. Now it's good. Should be. Alright, and make sure that I'm missing the little tab that holds the zipper. And then I'm going to go off and then back up. Just to reinforce that join right there. Alright, so I am off on that side. So clip my threads and then do the other side. Get my started. Reinforce the corner. And sew on up. And I don't have the D-ring on this side, so I can sew right up to the corner. Alright. And I want to aim so that my needle goes right, just off of that tab. If I catch the tab, the turning gets a little messy, so I make sure that it doesn't, aiming for the right spot. And again, a lot of bulk right there. Kind of push it down a little bit and then start hand cranking it through. Ever so gently tugging just to get it to encourage the feed through. Normally you wouldn't pull, but right here there's just so much bulk. It wants to stick. Alright, I'm in the right spot. Crank off and then back up to reinforce it. There we go. one more seam to do. The bottom one. So close. Alright. This one's a lot easier because it's just straight across and there isn't any, big sticky points of bulk. So again, I sew across my other seam a little bit and then I back up over it. Just create a nice solid corner. And then sewing across. And this one I want the corners to stay good. So if there's any excess on one side, kind of ease it through a little bit. Not too big of a deal, but I just try to keep it going across, and back up over it, and back. Alright, bottom seam is done. Now, after I clip my threads, I'm going to go and serge these edges, these seams that I did, because that's what I prefer to do. Otherwise it's going to continue to fray inside the bag, and then those little fuzzies get on your cross stitch. Not good. So I'm going to go serge those edges. I don't think you need to watch me do that because it's just serging a straight line. So when I come back, we will be at the ironing board. I'll put one last, press on these seams, and then we get to turn the bag. Yay! Alright guys, the edges are serged. I've trimmed the corners off a little bit, as you do to help, the corners turn out nicely. And now I'm gonna just hit it with iron to get that seam nice and set. Do that really quick. And then I have, when I sewed it, I had the zipper just a little bit away from this edge so that I could get past it. So now, because I have a good amount opening, I can get my hand in there and just push that zipper all the way open. It'll be easier to turn with it all the way open. So, one little tip is when I get ready to turn it, I hit it with a good amount of, get it nice and warm with the iron. The heat and the steam softens up the interfacing, so it is really easy to get it to move around to the other side. So turning it out like so, and then getting those corners to poke out nicely. Get them nice and neat. Get the seam to come out nicely on all sides just by pushing on it. I'm going to get the other corner like so. Make sure it's nice and neat. Doesn't have to be perfect, just passable for my tastes. Okay, so now I'm ready to turn these parts right here. And as you can see, you push them out like you do a normal corner, and once you get to a certain point, they just kind of pop out, so that tab that you sewed onto the end of the zipper just sits nicely on top. So did that one, and I'll do this one. Let me move the zipper just a little bit out of the way. See if I can get it in the camera. Just push it until that little tab sits out like so, and that's perfect. So the last thing I do is I just hit this again to get those seams used to being on your outside, you know, right side out, let's put it that way. Get the top too, and voila, we have a project bag. I am absolutely thrilled how this turned out. I love it. Alright, so I will go and film the last portion of this, and so you'll, words, come on words, I will go to my normal filming spot and we'll finish this whole thing up. Hey guys, so it is the next day. I got some sleep. I have edited the majority of the footage together, a lot of it. There's a couple of things I want to mention, you know, I'll get to that later. And so I also finished off the accessory bag. It went together so quickly. I mean, I already had all the pieces prepped. I wasn't trying to film as I was sewing it, so it went lightning quick. So there it is. It turned out the perfect width, 7 inches, which is what I need for the highlighters and the cheaters. It actually turned out a little bit shorter than what I was targeting for, but it's perfectly fine. I had a lot of wiggle room with how tall it was, so I took everything out of the other accessories bag and put it in here, and it fits perfectly. So it's just the right size. I love it. So I think from now on I will shoot for a 6-inch, and if it turns out to be a 5-inch, then it still works. I've noticed with my sewing that my sizes are never exactly the way that I try for. I think that's because, you know, my seams aren't always exact, and I might lose a little bit from having to trim, you know, trim the sides even. And you know, these seams are really, you know, they're pretty bulky, so I think you lose a little bit of just from the fabric having to come out and go back around. So it works. You know, I just have to keep in mind that if I'm trying for a specific size, to go a little bit bigger. But I'm still learning, you know, each bag I do, I learn a little bit more, I get a little bit better at it. So there's my accessory pouch, and here is the full big bag. It turned out awesome. I am thrilled with the little panel. My first time doing it, I think it went on pretty darn good. It's not perfect, but it is perfect for me. And I love the fact that I was able to FFO something in a different way. I've been doing a lot of finishing of projects for the past couple months, and you know, you can only do so many frames and flat folds and whatnot. So something a little different, and it turned out awesome. So nice big bag. It fits my 11 by 11 frame, and the portfolio for the patterns that I showed you slide in here like butter. So it's perfect for what I need it for, and it is gorgeous. I don't know if the camera can actually pick up just how gorgeous this fabric is. No, it's not doing it justice. In real life, there are gold accents all over the place, but they're not in your face gold. They're subtle enough that they cause these motifs to just kind of float off the fabric a little bit when you're looking at it. It is absolutely gorgeous. So I sat down for a little bit and I hand stitched, see, wonky stitches, hand stitched right up against there so that this D-ring doesn't want to turn anymore. It'll stay nice the way it's supposed to be. Now, one thing I noticed when I was editing the footage is when I was placing the D-ring on, you couldn't really see what I was doing. So I'm gonna do a diagram, kind of show you how that went together. And also, after I sewed the second side, second panel to the zipper, I did the top stitching of that flange down off camera, but I didn't mention it when I came back, so that was like an awkward transition. So yes, off camera I sewed that top seam on the second side to hold that flange down, and then I hit it with the iron. So then I went to the cutting station to do the D-ring and put the two panels together to sew them around. So the D-ring, let me grab a little piece of paper and a pencil. See if I can just sketch this out really quickly. Or, you know what, let me just do it real. Okay, imagine that this is the panel before it's sewn. This is their front panel, and I'm going to put the D-ring on. The tab needs to face inward on the front side of the fabric, so the D-ring's right here, and that tab comes out and sits right flush with the edge of this front panel. You pin that in place so that when you place the other panel over top, right side's facing, to sew it, and then when you turn it out, it's outside instead of inside. So that's how that works. Hopefully that's clear. If it's not, let me know. I'll do a little scenario. I'll do another little, another medium-sized bag, maybe for an 8x8 that I'm thinking. I got a nice Halloween print that I want to put one together. I'll make sure that is a little bit more clear when I do that. So just let me know. I can easily do that. Alright, so wow, I'm just not focused right now. Sheesh. I made notes, so maybe I should refer to my notes. Alright, one thing I failed to mention is when I'm making marks on, like the interfacing, drawing those lines, I'm using a friction pen. So, when the iron hits it, it disappears. I love those friction pens. They are just awesome. But I want to make sure that you knew I wasn't like using a Sharpie to do that or whatnot. Alright, where's my other notes? There we go. When I was talking about the little panel to make the ends for the zippers, I think I said a 1/2 inch wide. No, it's 1.5 inches. So I just wanted to clarify that in case there was any words. Confusion. There we go. Confusion. Alright, so one thing I didn't I failed to mention as well, when you are designing the front and the back, they don't have to be the same, you know. You could do the back with a solid fabric. You could reverse the order of the fabrics in the back. It's completely up to you how you design it. Most bags I like to do the front and back the same, just because it's easier, you know, and it looks good. But I've also done a bag where I did a solid back piece. It just depends. And there is no limit, you know, whatever you can imagine, you know, give it a try. Alright. Now, let me, yeah, like I said, I'm not focused right now. Okay, I think that's everything I needed to mention. Bear with me here. Alright, yep, that's everything. So, ending. I hope that this was helpful for you guys, that you enjoyed watching it, that it is going to encourage a few of you to give it a try. It's not difficult. I mean, sewing is just simply, you know, putting fabric through the sewing machine. It doesn't have to be perfect. It'll turn out, you know, and if it's not right, you can always take that seam out and try it again. Like I've said, I'm getting better with each one I do, so I'm learning as I go. It's just a matter of getting into it, doing it. So, if you have any questions, let me know. If you want any of the steps that I did shown a little bit more detailed, let me know. I can always make that happen. And as always, I will love to see what you guys create based on, you know, what I've shown you. Even if you just use a snippet of what I showed you to create your own thing, I want to see it. So, another tutorial. I made it through. I have to admit, this wasn't my best tutorial. I'm not focused for some reason, and I didn't plan it to the very minutest of detail that I normally do. So, it's a little bit not quite up to my usual snuff, but I think it's easy enough to follow. And like, if it isn't, just let me know. I will redo things if I need to. But I did try to film it. I was so tired. Good Lord, I was so tired. Alright, so this video is long enough. Yeah, I tried to trim out as much of, you know, the unnecessary bits of the process as I was filming the process. But it's still long, so I would apologize for that. But, you know, it is what it is. It's a process. I wanted to show you the important steps in the process that, you know, I can describe a straight seam, but, you know, describing how a zipper gets sewn on, you need to show that, and that's what I wanted to do. Just a few things I want to talk about before I go. This style of bag is how I like to do it. There are so many different styles out there, so this may not be your preference, but find something that does work for you. If it takes something different than this to get you encouraged to give it a try, we're good. I prefer the seam or the zipper at the top, and that's what I went looking for when I was looking for tutorials on that, because it just makes more sense to me. You know, opening at the top, you put things in. It's a bag. That weird zipper half, you know, part way down doesn't make sense to me. I know it still works, but it's just awkward as far as I'm concerned. So my preference, zipper on the top. I like to use interfacing just to give it structure, you know, give it a little bit of, you know, just that's what I prefer. I don't need it to be cushy. So that's why I don't use the fusible fleece. So these bags are perfect for me. They might be perfect for you, who knows? But give it a try. Try one of the bags tutorials that are out there and see what you like, what you don't like. And just learn to sew, learn the sewing craft, because making things yourself is so awesome. You know, I can make my own bags. That's just freaking awesome. So, okay, I think that's enough for today. I will see you guys next time. Happy stitching.